Anna will take over for concluding the lecture. So we looked at how to use the different databases, and then you have journal articles and maybe some conference proceedings in your hands and maybe some professional literature. But let's focus on the journal articles and ask ourselves, what do we see? What do we have in our hands? So what is the structure of such an article? And I would also like to point out a couple of things looking at one of the two articles that we read today. I'm going to talk about both, but one I'm going to also show you on screen. So last week we showed you the model that we use for this course, the research cycle, and you should be able to see the research cycle also in the articles that you read. So early on in the article, there is at least the knowledge question, the research question that's going to be studied in the article. But because we are in management, you will see that quite often, somewhere in the introduction, you will also see the managerial problem that's being addressed. Now, this is not always the case, but actually we as authors, we quite often get the remark and the suggestion from reviewers or editors from a journal, could you please in the beginning of your article also show the relevance by linking it to managerial problems from practice? So in actual articles, you quite often see that also in the introduction. And that means that these authors also had to review professional literature to link their research to managerial problems. Then you will find some section that reviews the current evidence or presents the literature review. It might not be called that way. It might be called theoretical background or theory, but there will be a section where you will recognize that the authors have been going out to do a search in the literature. You will find a section where they present the methods, could be called research design, could be called just the method section. So this is also in your bachelor project where you design your project. What are you going to do? What kind of data collection and data analysis methods are you going to use? This is also what an academic author does in their article. Of course, there will be a section presenting the results. So that's also part of your bachelor project, what you have to do. And there will be a discussion. And then sometimes it's quite hidden, but because we are publishing in management journals, there's almost always also a section, but sometimes it's just a paragraph going back to that professional practice and explaining what the recommendations are to practice. It could be hidden in a section called discussion, so it's not always that clear to see. I just wanted to take also this chance to show you what it looks like, for instance, here in the Salviaridis and Van der Valk paper. This was one of the two papers to read for today. What you see here is a structured abstract. You won't see that always, but this paper has been published in a journal from Emerald Publishers, and Emerald, for all the journals, they have a so-called structured abstract. So the abstract is divided in different parts. What I would also like to show you quickly is that most journals, they nowadays also show the history of the journal. So you see here that the manuscript was first received the 3rd of October 2017. It was revised in June 2018, meaning that the authors received the reviews and then revised the manuscript. And it was finally accepted the 22nd of July 2018. And you know that the full reference is, if we go to the bottom here, 2019. So like I already said in the chat earlier, journal articles can be 2 years old, 3 years old even, because there is this time period between the author submitting it, then 1, 2, or 3 rounds of revisions, and then ultimately the publication in a journal. I would also like to point out here in the corner, let me enlarge it a bit. Here in the corner, you also see the DOI, the DOI, And every article nowadays has a digital object identifier, which is a unique set of numbers and letters that it can be used to always find this specific article back. So every article out there has a specific DOI. And you actually see here hidden in the DOI is the year of submission, 2017. Hidden is the name of the journal, International Journal of Operations and Production Management. But DOIs can also be only numbers. There is no rule how it should be set up. The only thing you know that it's unique. And once an article is finally published, you will see a volume number, an issue number, and page numbers. So make sure that you include those also in the reference that you put in your reference list. Although one thing that is changing, and that's also a very recent development, some journals don't publish separate volumes and issues anymore. And then you will see that articles only have a number. It's not the same as the DOI, but they only have a number. They don't have so-called volume, issue, and page number information anymore. But most articles still have. So it's important to know where to find the different elements. Okay, let me go back to the presentation. So this is where we were. And how much depth is being arrived at the different elements in an article. That will vary a lot. So a decision science article looks very different from a theory building article, but you will discover that as you are reading more and more articles. And today we gave you 2 articles about the same topic. They're both about contracting, but they're very different in the research type and also the way that the articles are built up. But more about that in a minute. So for instance, theory testing looks very different from other types of papers. Now, if you are theory building, then there's a lot of focus on explaining how the cases were selected and why, because these cases, they are the rich empirical data to build the theory on, while in a theory testing paper, it's very much about how the test is being executed. So it's about the variables, etc. Now, if we look at the 2 articles we asked you to read, there is Van Neste and Puranam. There is an abstract, but it's not a structured abstract like the other one has. There's a very clear introduction. And then they have a section called theory, which is in fact the literature review, methods, separately measures, but quite often methods and measures are together. But this is a theory testing paper, so that's why there is such an emphasis on measures. Results, discussion of the results, a separate conclusion, and of course references. And the Salverius van der Valk, very clearly recognizable and structured abstract. Again, an introduction. Then they call their literature review theoretical background. Then there is a research method section, not subdivided in methods and measures. The results are called findings in this case. There is also a discussion, not a separate conclusion, and there are references. Now, you can also compare this to your bachelor project. We're asking you for assignment 1, which is a literature review, to also include a short introduction, to refine it when you write assignment 2, and to perhaps, if needed, further refine it for assignment 4. So that's the introduction will go through a couple of rounds of refinement. Assignment 1 is a literature review, so that's comparable to what you see as theory or theoretical background in the 2 articles. And it will be part of assignment 4 because assignment 4 is the literature review, the project design, and the results together. So assignment 2, the research, the project design, is your research methods. Then in assignment 4, you really present the results or the findings together with these 2. And the separate assignment 5 is the discussion. So please, when you are looking at these assignments and you want inspiration, also look at the articles that we're giving to you. We're giving 2 today, but we're giving 2 more later on in the course. And then you have 4 examples of how to build an academic argument. And of course, all assignments need to have references. Every time you use something that has been developed by someone else, you need to include a reference to that original source. Now, in these articles, the authors will make claims, and the claims will differ by the type of article that you're reading. So if you're reading an exploratory, or what we also call descriptive study, the claims that these authors make are about how frequent something is occurring, or how large or small the problem or the phenomenon is, how important certain things are, sometimes also how they can be presented in a typology, but they are describing something. Theory building, of course, they will end up with some theoretical framework. So they make a claim about how concepts relate to each other, which is the cause and which is the effect. Maybe they will have a claim about a moderator or a mediator. And if they are really writing a good paper, they will also explain the mechanism why a certain cause leads to a certain effect. And they will describe via what mechanism this will happen. So that type of claim you will see in a theory building study. Of course, in theory testing studies, the claims are again different. They will give you estimates of certain parameters, like a regression coefficient or a correlation coefficient or some other effect size. That's the claim that they make. We estimate this correlation coefficient to be 0.67 and significant at an alpha of 5%. That kind of claims. Very often followed by, this means that hypothesis 1 needs to be rejected. Or, and this is actually not proper language, they might say hypothesis 2 is confirmed. If you are extremely purist, the only thing you do is testing whether a hypothesis is rejected or not. And so when people say it's confirmed, they actually mean to say the hypothesis is not rejected. But that is, then you have to be a real purist to use that language. But that's the official language. And if you read a decision science study, then the claim of the author will be about, this is the optimal decision to make, or this is the design for the system that is optimal. Like we talked about, the traveling salesman problem. What is the optimal route that the traveling salesman should take? That's the kind of claim that these papers make. Now, if we apply that to the 2 articles that we asked you to read, so that's really the role of these articles in our lectures. We want to give them to you so that you have examples to refer to, and also Anna and I, we will continuously refer to these articles to show you what it looks like in reality. So Van Neste and Puranam, they make this kind of claims. The findings demonstrate the existence of an effect. So they demonstrate that there is an effect between A and B. There is a learning effect. So demonstrate, you should already recognize that as a word that also means testing. They're testing something and the findings demonstrate that it is there. And then they become more specific and they talk about downward and upward effects, and they make claims about what the effect really looks like. And you should recognize these as claims that relate to whether a hypothesis is rejected or not. And literally they talk, if you read these pages, especially page 196 is important, you see that they refer also explicitly to the hypotheses. So all of this should give you an immediate idea, I am reading a theory testing paper. Now the other paper is very different, and the claims are also very different. They say it's also more cautious. The findings suggest promotion-framed incentives lead to productive behavioral and relational supplier response. So they say that we've done studies, we've done research, we find stuff, and they suggest that there's a relationship between A and B. So it really reads like we are here to, that this is the outcome of our study, a relationship between 2 variables. And they formalize it very clearly in propositions. So the claims are then formalized in a proposition 1, proposition 2, and proposition 3. So these are very clearly claims about how concepts relate to each other. So it's either theory building or theory elaboration. And yeah, we chose these 2 articles on purpose. You see that this type of article ends with propositions, and this type of article starts with hypotheses and then ends with a test of these hypotheses. So those are really important triggers and pointers for you to see the difference between types of research and the types of claims that these authors then make. Now, we also promised you, but we said already a couple of things about it. How do you recognize a good article? Now, citations are an indicator, but not always a good proxy, because recent papers cannot have gathered a lot of citations. Even if a recent paper is a top quality paper, no one has had the chance to cite it yet. So number of citations, you have to be very careful. Or if the article is on a very niche topic, then not thousands of people will cite it, and it might still be in that niche. It might be a very important paper. So use it with caution, but you can use it as one of the indicators that might indicate quality. Now, you also see quality by reading the paper. If the article is very transparent, what did they do? They might even be transparent in saying we first tried this and then we did that as a follow-up. And those are papers that really want to show we are high quality researchers. We are telling you exactly what we did. We're giving you details about the data. If there is not a lot of transparency and not a lot of detail in the data, that could be a reason to be a little bit more wary about the quality of the article. Also, if the authors reflect on their own method, so they write a really good discussion in the end, that also shows that they are authors that know that what they are doing, because they realize it's never perfect, and they can reflect on also the weaknesses of their own work. To me, that's a sign of quality. And that also counts for you as students. If you write a good discussion, also being transparent about where you were not perfect, that is better quality to me than trying to shove everything under the carpet and just pretend that you did a flawless study, because no one can do a flawless study. So quality is also seen in your own reflections on the weaknesses. And Anna said we're going to use the word critical a couple of times. That's also being critical about yourself, to know the weaknesses of your own studies. Now, journals have quality indicators. Every journal has an impact factor, and the impact factor is calculated based on the citations. So it says something about how often the journal as a whole is being cited. And you can go to this website to see impact factors for journals. So some journals have impact factors below 1, that's really low, sometimes above 10, and a lot of journals are in the middle. So it is a bit of a relative guide. Again, be cautious, but it is an indicator. And especially the ARIM list is a good indicator. But there are thousands of journals out there, and only a couple of hundred are on the ARIM list, so it's definitely not complete. Now, professional literature is more difficult. Check the author or the consulting company. Are they well known? Are they transparent about their methods? Can they reflect also on the weaknesses? Do they discuss alternative points of view? It's more on you as a reader to judge the quality, but reputation can be part of that assessment. Now, you might also recognize it by the way it's being written, the style. It can be very opinionated, and on the other hand, it can be really, what we call calm and logic, and it has a more of an objective feel to it, especially if there are also these alternative points of view. So make sure that you check how certain professional sources are written. Again, no fixed rule. Experience will teach you, but we give a couple of pointers on this page. So if you then apply some of that to our articles, we see Salviaridis and Van der Valk cited 28 times in Google Scholar, 14 times in Web of Science. This number is lower because Web of Science counts how often it has been cited in Web of Science. And Web of Science only looks at the vetted set of journals, while Google Scholar looks everywhere. It's a relatively recent article, 2019, so it doesn't have the chance to be cited a lot yet. A primary journal, which is a good sign, not a star, but primary, so it's good. High impact factor, almost 10. And if I read it, I see a high level of transparency and detail, extensive discussion of results. Of course, we're not going to give you bad papers to read. But if we take the other one, it's a little bit older, so it had more chance of being cited. And you see that it has indeed been cited a lot more than 200 times Google Scholar, 120 times Web of Science. It's a star journal, so that also explains partly the citations. People like to cite better journals, so a star journal will also have generally have more citations. But funny enough, the journal impact factor is lower. So this gives you some proof that you have to use it carefully. I think everyone would agree that this journal is better. It doesn't mean that always the impact factor is higher. And this is still a good impact factor. At 5.1 is really a nice impact factor. Also a high level of transparency and detail. And what I also like is that they have quite an extensive part on robustness checks. So they do their analysis, then they check how robust it is for different ways of operationalizing their variables. And they also give alternative explanations for the findings. You won't see that in many journals, but since this is such a high quality journal, they've probably asked the authors, could you also please discuss alternative explanations? Okay, I'm handing over to Anna, but not before I ask, is there anything in the chat, Anna, that I should talk about?
No, I think we pretty much, I tried to cover everything, and there are a couple of things that I'll try to pick up and discuss if I have time in the remaining part. Yeah, I think we are good. Yeah, then let me share my screen and we will go from here. So last part, and an important one, definitely, because it's really, of course, so far has been about how to read and how to look at the articles, and now we really need to think how to write. Yeah, but still, we'll touch a bit more about reading, because of course you cannot write without reading. But the first thing I would like to see that we cannot really, I think, teach you how to write, yeah, because writing is a practical skill. So you're not going to walk away today being a good writer, yeah. So no two writers are the same. There is also not, a single way we would be able to choose to offer you how to write, yeah, because again, you will have your individual style, and even as a team, you will still develop your individual style. And there is no book that can also teach you to write, because yes, there are books about how to write a literature review, and they can be helpful in terms of tips and approaches and mistakes to avoid, but again, you need to write to learn how to write. Yeah, so there are two things that will really help you. Yeah, you learn by doing. Yeah, this is the only thing they can do. So you write, you analyze how well you write, and maybe you exchange it with your teammates for analysis, you get feedback, and you write again. There's no other way. And you also learn to write by reading. Yeah, if you pay attention not only to the content, but you also pay attention about to what other write and how they write. Yeah, because this is something that makes you maybe then get some ideas in terms of, oh, I like this style more. This seems like really easy for me to understand, or vice versa. The way these people write is very difficult for me. Yeah, so you will develop this kind of skill, but again, this is just learning by doing, and there is nothing we can do about this. But what we are going to do, we are going to offer some principles about good writing, some tips about good writing, and also we'll talk a bit more about what scientific writing is, yeah, academic writing is, because you are going to write an assignment that's supposed to be, of course, academic. So first of all, I would like to say that searching, reading, and writing is a cycle that you will keep doing together. It's not like, let me first search for all the literature, then I stop because I'm happy with number of sources, and I start reading all of it. And after I read all of it, I start writing. It doesn't work like this, yeah? It's a cycle that you go through. Let's say you build your mind map preliminary, you start searching for literature, and as you start searching, you find some really clearly good sources, relevant sources, high quality sources. You start reading them, and you start thinking about alternative ideas, new search terms, or maybe additional topic kind of developments that or you develop them. It's really an iterative process. It's never like, for example, now you have 3 weeks to write your assignment, 1 week research, 1 week we read, 1 week we write. It doesn't work like this, yeah? It makes the thing a bit more complex when you're working in the team to organize this. But again, you have to understand that this process is cyclical, yeah? So this is something that you have to deal with. When you read, and I think this was a question in the chat that I want to address, yeah, because someone asked, what do I do if I have, 50 plus articles? I cannot read all of them. Well, yeah, in research you could, and we read many more than this. We read hundreds, I think, when we write our own research. But let's say, okay, your time is limited. What you should do when you have, let's say, output of, I don't know, a couple hundred articles in your research output, when you look at Scopus on Web of Science or Google Scholar, whenever. So first you read titles, yeah? And at this point, you can clearly filter out everything that's clearly not relevant, because even despite your good search terms, you can still see things that are not belonging where you want to be, yeah? Because maybe the topic was identified by the database in a wrong way, or there could be some mistake. So you filter that out. But if you're not sure, may work, may not work, the rule is keep it in. This allows you to reduce number of papers already. And then what you read, and for academic papers, it's easy because Eric also showed you that every paper has an abstract. Then you read abstracts, because abstracts really gives you a good understanding of what this paper is about, maybe what method it uses. Yeah, so it gives you really insight of what you will see in the text. And at this point, you can further filter some out. Yeah, again, because you can clearly decide that no, that's not something I want to look at. It's kind of on my topic, but it's maybe just too far from where I want to focus. Or maybe it's, wrong method I'm not interested in, or something like that. And then again, the rule is, if in doubt, keep it in. And this is basically 2 steps through which you can reduce the number of papers that you need to read. But after that, you need to read everything that is left on the table. Basically, there is no other way. And these articles you have to really examine in full, and then maybe you still will scrap something out after reading it in full. Yeah, but it's an iterative process. But again, first you read and you start writing at a very high level. Just put ideas of subsections in literature review, then maybe some keywords, key terms, mention key sources that will go there, and you keep building this as you read and understand more. Again, this is a cycle, and it's an iterative process. Yeah, this is something you cannot really separate these 3 phases from each other. Reading critically, yeah. Eric, I think, already explained to you signs of general quality of the literature. He mentioned that it's important that you see articles are transparent and they explain their points of view and they present to you like data to look at, etc., etc. But there are 3 things that I want to help you to focus on. So first of all, you need to understand when you take an academic paper or a business reading, whatever you want to have a look at, what's the purpose? Yeah, so what is the purpose of this reading, and how is it relevant for me? Yeah, so if you understand the purpose and if you can understand how it is relevant for you potentially, then you can already kind of put it in a certain bucket that will be useful for you. Is the theory is the one that you're after? Is it maybe method that you want to explore? Maybe you want to see how the definitions are developed or how the concepts are made practical and measurable. Yeah, maybe you want some papers that contradict the opinion that you are thinking about. Yeah, so there can be different ways of being relevant, and it's good if you think in terms of how this particular piece of information that I'm now looking at can be helpful for me. Yeah, so try to identify in which ways. And it can be more than one. It doesn't have to be just one relevance types, but you need to think why I want to use certain source or scrap it out. Then what is good to also look at is the time when something was published. Yeah, because sometimes actually even if we receive as reviewers papers that people want to publish in journals, one of the most, I think, common critiques that we have to give is that, but your literature is not up to date. Yeah, you're missing really these relevant recent developments, and you tell me, you refer to sources from 1990s, from early 2000s, but we are now 20 years later. Yeah, so be sure that literature that you include is up to date. Classic is classic, and you'll recognize this classic by high number of citations, because definitely if it's an article published many years ago that get a lot of citations, thousands of citations in some cases, then it means this is something probably that many other people really base on their research, and it can be and it should be kept in. But you need really to see that, I want to show something from 2020 and 2021, etc. Yeah, so do not forget to check for the recency. Yeah, because you really need to demonstrate that you know what's been happening in this area just now. But foundations are also important, as I said. Yeah, and then of course you are not supposed to review all development of the topic, but you need to kind of build some relevant links between older and new research. Yeah, and I will show you a bit more about how this can be done later. But yeah, so timing is important. Date of publication is important because it plays a role in how relevant this article can be. They can get outdated if they're on topics that are time sensitive. And then quality of the source. Again, Eric already told a bit about this, but of course, judging on the quality, both professional and academic, is very important. Yeah. What's the point the authors try to make? What argumentation they use? Does it really fit the method that they're using? What's the evidence that they present to support their conclusions? Is there anything that is claimed but actually remains unsupported? Do you think that's possibly biased because there is some context that would make you think that objectivity maybe is not there? So this is something that you need to think about. And these are basically 3 labels that I put. Yeah, relevance, time factor, and 4 ways of being critical. Because if you read Saunders et al., they briefly mention about how you can be critical when you read and when you write. Yes, and I will develop this thought just in a minute, but this is something that I want you to keep in mind, that there are different ways of being critical about the paper. Tips, and this is again something that the reading that we suggested for this week tells you, but this is something that I would like to reinforce. Yeah, you need to read. If you print things, of course you don't print all of them, probably will maybe print only very key articles, but you read with pen and paper. You need to make notes, be it PDF or be it database that you can use for literature. You need to make some notes, yeah, because you cannot rely on your memory for what this paper is relevant for me. Yeah, so you need to leave the track of what's there, what you're thinking about when you are reading. Do not simply use highlighting, yes, because what happens sometimes people start using blue, yellow, pink, because in 2 weeks' time you will not be able to remember what was this pink, what was this yellow, and why I used this color. Yeah, so you can use maybe some coloring for different types of relevance, but do not just use coloring. Yes, again, leave some trace, leave some comments, leave some words behind when you read. Yeah, and the more you write in terms of what is the idea, why this paper is there, how do I want to use it for, the easier for you it will be to use it later and put it in the right spot and use it in the right way in your literature review. We all develop our own, I think, kind of this personal language of codifying how we read, but do so. Yeah, it's definitely time well spent. And there was a question of how do you store all the literature that you find? Yeah, because there is no maybe easy way to organize it on your laptop. For academic literature, there is a free software that's called Mendeley. And this is a way to organize literature because that's where you can put all the academic sources and organize them and make annotations, and then it will be very, very clear how you can use them. Yeah, it's pretty easy to use. There are videos on YouTube how to use it, and it's free. I think there is, definitely there is both desktop and online version. I'm not sure if both of them are free, but this is something that you can use. It's called Mendeley. Yeah, that's definitely an example that I would use. It's a bit more tricky to give advice for professional literature because I think Mendeley cannot accommodate such sources, but probably there will be less of academic literature, professional literature for you to use than academic on one hand, and on the second you may maybe try to make a Excel file that will be easy to sort and use with different columns that you can organize yourself in the way it works. Yeah, but yeah, for academic literature, there is a good database that you can organize your sources in. 4 ways of being critical. Again, this is something that is important because this helps you to structure, I think, thinking of what critical means. So first of all, Saunders et al. Mentioned such thing as critique of rhetoric, which means that when you read look at the language that is used. Yeah, is the argumentation present? Are conclusions supported? Yeah, how valid is argumentation? So this is really just reasoning in research. Is it good quality? Yeah, is it something that you think feels reliable and valid? When you write on your own research, do the same thing. Use good argumentation. Do not leave things hanging out without explaining why you arrive at certain conclusions. Yeah, if you criticize something, provide evidence. Yeah, this is just again general sound approach to writing. Then there is such thing as critique of tradition. Yeah, which means that be skeptical when the papers simply seem to follow standard argumentation, standard flow, standard theories to use. Yeah, so especially you see something from paper to paper without really proper reflection of why certain things are used or said. This is a way, I think, to kind of be a bit careful whether it's really something that that people write with good thinking about it. If it's a good source, if it's a good paper, that's something that you don't really see much. But I think maybe you, as a non-experienced writer, have to be really careful in simply following something that feels like common sense or general truth in my topic or theme. So you have to really be a bit careful if something that you are putting there simply seems true to you because everybody believes it's true. Yeah, so don't blindly agree with the tradition. Authority. Be skeptical about a theory or expert opinion that's used very often to explain something. Yeah, because this is a sense that a sign that people again just take something that's mainstream, but without necessarily looking for fresh alternative opinions or explanations. Yeah, and like the good science always looks for alternatives and new explanations and ways to look at things. And again, when you write, look for alternatives yourself. Don't just get stuck to one theory, to one expert opinion. Be open. Yeah, so look for valid alternatives that can help you to write about your research. And then objectivity. Yeah, so this again, understanding that no researcher is bias-free, opinion-free, and value-free. We all have our points of view, and it's our role as a researcher to try to recognize this limitation and try to really overcome it. But it's sometimes not possible, yeah? But in some situations, I think people tend to be more strong opinioned about certain topics. So do see if this is something that sounds objective to you, or you see a strong opinion, which is never a good, I think, sign for objectivity in science. And as a researcher, recognize that you may also have certain opinions about a topic, and think about how you can deal with them to be sure that this is not making your research lean towards your opinion too strongly. How can you stay objective? Yeah, so these are 4 ways of being critical when you read, and they translate directly in being critical when you write. Your main challenge, I think, is that you are not an experienced researcher and that you do not maybe have yet much knowledge about your BP theme, the topic of your research. Yeah, so the way to really try to overcome this challenge is to try to get up to speed on your topic as much as possible. Yeah, so first really try to read to educate yourself before you start reading to review, because the more you understand the topic, the better quality review you can produce. Yeah, because then being critical is easier. If you don't understand what's happening, of course, it's very hard to judge if something is good or not, if something is expert or not. Yeah, if it's really a tradition or not. So, yeah, it's not basically, I think, going to be perfect within these weeks that you have in front of you. But again, educate yourself on the topic, and then being critical will become much more feasible and easy to do. I want to give you an example from the paper that we offered this week, and I marked this different parts of the text with different color because I want to show you how articles approach all this critique or approach certain things that I think is important for you to understand. So one thing I mentioned when I was explaining the time factor, that it's important to build bridges between classics and recent research, and that's exactly, I think, what the first sentence does. Yeah, so it really kind of highlights what recent contracting research does, and it tells you that it's been a shift in attention. Yeah, so it clearly tells you what was there before and what was there now. Of course, in the papers that are published, literature reviews are shorter than the ones that you're going to be writing. Yeah, and of course, in the published papers, the expectation is that the reader kind of understands the topic about which he or she is reading. Yeah, so that's why explanation here is very short, and there is no deep dive into this maybe classic type of research and explanation of it, but people who are familiar with the topic will kind of understand what it means. Yeah, very elegant, very short way of shifting, let's say, attention between recent and classic research and highlighting what's different in it. Then the next type, what I think is interesting, is to really kind of see how the logic evolves. Yeah, so here the authors present the recent research. They basically explain to you what it has been busy with, and they really compare and highlight the different findings of this research. And they basically, they do not think contrast here, because their idea is here to build the body of recent research to show what the topic has found so far. But they really find, I think, quite elegant way of connecting them. Yeah, Van Esten Puranam, that the other article mentioned, yeah, they say in a similar vein, they found something. So it's a flow of agreement and highlighting what different sources have been doing, yeah? You don't have to write every time that the authors agree with this one or the authors do not agree with this one. It's a much more elegant way to presenting this agreement or disagreement. And then lastly, what I highlighted with blue color here is that they also explain that the certain research that is there is not providing enough grounds for answering questions that they want to answer. Yeah, so they have not been able to find explanation of psychological impact of contracts in the current literature. So that's why they kind of want to do something else. Here they want to bring new theories, yeah, because the current ones are not explaining it, and that's basically critique of authority, as these theories are really the key ones for explaining contracts. If you know this topic, you will recognize this. But this is the way, again, to kind of say, okay, classic theories do not explain what we want to explain. We need to bring new perspective in. Yeah. So again, being critical does not mean literally writing about something is not good enough. Yeah. There is an elegant way of presenting this in the text that will still very clearly translate the idea of what is happening in the text. Yeah, and same for Van Esten Puranam. Yeah, so same logic. They start from definition of the contract and introduction of traditional theories this time. Then they say basically that it's not something that you can use to explore what we want to explore, and then they basically explain how the new type of, let's say, view will help them to answer the question. Yeah, again, when you read, this is not about the content, this is about understanding how other people read, right? Yes, and if you pay attention to this, it will really help you to kind of explore and understand what are the ways of building connections, what are the ways of criticizing things without really being negative. Yeah, so you have to learn this way of being polite, but at the same time being critical. Now, how to write critically and make a good story. This is something that also Saunders et al. Touch upon. So first of all, you need to really tell to the reader what literature review will cover. Yeah, this is not something that you always see in the academic papers, but again, academic papers are very limited in terms of length that they can, let's say, devote to the literature review. You don't have such strict limitations. So it's good to say what I'm going to write about. Start high level, provide brief overview of themes and ideas that you will be including. Summarize, contrast, compare. Yeah, we saw some examples of how it's done. You don't have to really say every time I'm comparing, I'm contrasting, just make it clear to the reader. Narrow it down. Yeah, because some works will be more relevant to your research than others. Then when you continue writing, you really find this most relevant research for you and you deep dive into this. Yeah, and here you write more, you write in more depth, but again, your ideas compare and contrast what's there and what's not there that your research can bring further to the table. Yeah, this is the whole purpose of literature review, to position your own study within the existing body of the knowledge. And finally, it's a good practice if you have space in terms of words, and you do, close it with a summary and a brief conclusion. So this is the idea. Sorry, guys, fighting with a bad cough already couple weeks. And then when you start writing, your mind map can really be helpful for you to position your logic, right? Yeah, to start from most generic to most specific, to say where I need to definitions, to see which theories I need to bring in. This really helps you to organize your writing in terms of a good flow for the reader. Scientific writing or academic writing, you can find both terms, has certain expectations. And it's not only, of course, about, which words you use, which terms you use, it's also part of it, but it's much more. And what I want to highlight is 3 things about scientific writing. So the most important thing is the message for your reader. And the message is something that you actually want to say. Then comes the structure, yeah? So how you organize your message. And only then comes the language, yeah? So yes, it is about using right terms. It's about using professional, let's say, dry academic writing, but it will not save you if your structure and message is not there. Message means content and purpose, yeah? What I'm writing about and why. I'm writing about something that maybe supports my own research. I'm writing about maybe something that highlights the gaps that I want to fill in. I may be writing about something that is needed as a theoretical foundation for me. Yeah, so what and why is questions that you need to keep in mind while you're trying to construct your message. Structure is about order of messages. Yeah, so in which order I'm putting my text. Yeah, and it means also that you think about the flow, how they connect to each other, and you also think about the pace. I'll explain pace in a second. And mind maps are used and useful for, I think, both of this, yeah, because again, they help you to not forget about parts of your message, and they think you also can think about the structure, what follows from the previous topics, what needs to come next. So again, using mind maps, more I think the relevance trees is something that's quite helpful for organizing your writing. And finally, language. Yeah, I'm not going to preach about good English language here, but it's really has to be clear, formal, professional, with good grammar and concise. Yeah, so this is something that is important for every type of essay or paper that you need to write for university. Academic articles are always good examples for the language that you need to aim for. Yeah, this is, I think, quite easy to understand what you need to strive for. Like order of thinking, like what do I think in terms of message, structure, language? What comes first? Well, ideally, message comes first because you need to think about what I want to write and why, and then how I'm going to do it. But on the other hand, good language also helps you to sharpen your messages. So kind of, let's say, bottom up also works a bit, yeah? But again, first, what are my messages? How can I structure them for clarity for my reader? And which language should I use, yeah? This is your general logic with working with scientific writing. And I want to stress and stop a tiny bit more on the structure, because I think language is, again, pretty evident what you need to aim for. And message, again, you just need to see what is the topic you're writing about and why you're writing about certain things. Structure maybe is a bit more tricky, and it also kind of something that I think helps you with other things. And what you need to always keep in mind that you are writing for your reader. And reader for research is someone in business school who understands, let's say, the basic of business processes, but maybe not an expert into the theme that you are really diving into. Yeah. So you don't have to explain the basics, but you have to explain the specifics. Yeah. So that's the balance where you need to stand on. Structure. So first of all, you need to think about what my reader knows, and then you move to more unknown. Yeah. So do not start from something that's completely not understandable. Yes. Introduce this gradually. Take reader perspective. Yeah, what should come next to keep the story clear and logical? Yeah, so what I have explained, is there any gap that I need to kind of fill before I move to something next? Because it's a very common mistake to write about something that you haven't yet introduced or defined. And then there is, of course, a logical gap that makes something that you want to make clear unclear. Yeah, because again, definitions first, explanation first, and then maybe argumentation about why something works or doesn't work. Structure also means good flow. Yeah, subsection titles, maybe numbering, even several layers of numbering if the structure is complex, because it helps you to guide your reader. Yeah, and if you use subsection titles, think about how clear are the titles and whether they correspond to the content of what you're writing about. Yeah, again, very easy thing to think about, but also very easy thing to forget about. Yeah, so titles are not formality, they have to make sense. They also help reader to kind of expect what can be found in this next paragraphs. Yeah, and the longer the text, the more structuring and numbering is needed. If you go back to literature reviews and the two papers that we gave to you, Vanessa and Puranam do use subtitles, but no numbering. And the other paper doesn't have anything, it's just the flow, which is maybe not super optimal, but it's acceptable because the literature review is only 1,000 words short or long, yeah, and it's a really short one, yeah. If you use no subtitles, no sections, no numbers, in literature review that's like 10, 15 pages long, then it becomes a problem because it really becomes blurry and structure is completely absent. So do think about the structure. It really helps you deliver a much better result at the end. And then, of course, it is something that I expect you don't hear it for the first time. The idea is one paragraph for one thought. Yeah, the flow needs to be clear. You introduce the topic, you provide argumentation, you close. Yes, and if you need to build bridges between the paragraphs. I'll show you in a second how this works in the papers that we have for this week. Tables and figures are a great thing to use, and I think in many cases you forget about them because they really help you to avoid being too descriptive. They allow you to present a lot of information in a very concise way, so do consider using them. It really makes your literature review better, yeah, and it's not kind of creates the perception that, oh, I'm trying to avoid writing. No, presence of good tables and figures means actually very good writing. And finally, the rule is that do not stop too long on things that are simple. Again, think about if the reader should know something or not, but do spend time to explain something that is more complex. Yeah, so be proportional in terms of the length in introducing topics depending on their complexity, or ideas depending on their complexity. That's what pace actually means. Yeah, question.
Anna?
Yeah.
I'm mindful of the time.
Yeah.
We're running a bit over, and I'm
Yeah.
also sure it's my fault. Shall I do referencing and plagiarism next week? And then there's still some closing. I think you want to do
Yeah.
maybe one example.
Yeah, I will do so. Last example, and I think we will do so. So what I want to show you actually how the text flows. Yeah, so simply looking at how the words that close one paragraph open the next paragraph. Yeah, so this is again the beginning literature review from this source, and they end introduction of the current research with psychological role of contracts. This is the first paragraph that ends, and then psychological impact is explained as something that's missing in the research in the second paragraph. And then again, they start from psychological impact of contracts and how they're going to address it in the next one. Yeah, really effortless flow. Yeah, whatever closes the previous paragraph opens the next one. Yeah, and this is something that you should also aim for, because this also means that you are not, let's say, jumping from topic to topic, and you're really keeping the reader within the same logic, within the same flow, within the same understanding of where we're moving from. Yeah, so again, one paragraph, one thought. One paragraph is long because it introduces the research that's relevant. One is short because it simply highlights that there is no research on this topic. Yeah, so different ideas, different length, but the flow is really, really excellent here. And that's basically what I just mentioned. Example of a table. One table gives you opportunity to do definitions and also comparison. Yeah, so that's why I say do use tables. They save space, they add clarity. They're a fantastic way of summarizing literature, especially if you want to compare some sources, for example, or introduce multiple definitions. Yeah, so highly, highly advised to do that. And also breaks your text visually, also very nice thing to do. We are really out of time. I do think that maybe it's indeed a good thing if we talk about referencing plagiarism next week. I think still we spent time quite well today, but I do expect that people want to get to their lunch. So last thing before we leave, this is as usual what we always promise to show in every lecture, how you can evaluate if you learned everything that you are supposed to learn from today. Yeah, so check if you can answer this question as a yes. And then this week we have Q&A on Wednesday. I did receive question if it will be possible to do it online because there are strikes coming up with the public transport. I will answer this today in the announcement. We didn't have time